Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Let me just say welcome everyone to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. We'll sit for 30 minutes, and now I'll turn it over to our guest speaker today, Reverend Shutt.
My name's Reverend Liên Shutt. Thank you for the invitation. Okay, so here we go, folks. 3 bells in my tradition to start, and then 1 bell to end. And today it is a guided meditation on the 4 Brahma Viharas, because it relates to the talk. Here we go. All right. Begin by finding a posture that gives you a sense of settledness. And as the body is always present, bring your attention to a body point. The 2 main ones are posture or breath. You're seated either on a cushion or a chair. Perhaps it's your sitting bones as it connects to the seat, again, of a cushion or a chair. If it's a chair, perhaps also your left foot and right foot or your feet, and on a cushion, your knees. If you're lying down, then any part of the back side or the side, any part of the body that feels supported by the ground. And then the posture of awakening is one of openness to receive. So in the seated, it's useful to lift the chest and settle it onto the mid-spine or the lower spine, center the head into the upper spine. So be careful that your chin is not raised. I like to say the chin is parallel to the ground. This helps to give you a sense of settledness. It is said, see it for yourself, that when the chin is raised, then more discursive thinking happens. Just not wrong or a problem, except if you're wanting to connect with a sense of calmness, then it doesn't foster that so easily. Because you're comparing, you're making lists. So this is why the invitation is to keep the chin parallel to the ground. For many of us, we tend to hold our head forward. This is why your shoulders or your neck hurts when you're seated. So bringing the chin into the throat just a little bit. I myself like to think about right at the bottom of the back of the ears, if I extend that up. So that helps me to bring my head back and keep the chin in. If it's the breath, then find 1 or 2 points, perhaps on the inhale or the exhale. Less is more in concentration meditation. So just find 1 or 2 points to keep bringing your attention back. And in doing that and sustaining the attention, the result is calm. So you don't have to make calm, you just place your body and your attention on 1 or 2 points, and the result will be calm. Okay, and as I lead you in the 4 Brahma Viharas, or the 4 divine abodes, it is a guided meditation. And it's considered by the Buddha to be practices that are easeful. Many of you have probably heard of the first one, metta or maitri, as in like Maitri Hospice, usually translated as loving kindness. And myself these days appreciate just kindness or goodwill. Karuna, second, compassion, a wish to alleviate suffering. Third is mudita, inclusive joy, I like to say, sometimes altruistic joy. And the last is upekkha or upeksha, usually translated as equanimity, or the balance of heart and mind. These are visualization meditations, actually a combination of concentration and vipassana practice. So there's several things to consider. One is that as these are qualities that we have, and in the practice we're cultivating them in the sense of we're trying to connect to them. And the quality is more important than anything. And by that I mean the ability to connect to a felt sense of them. Not whether you do it right or wrong, and whether you can overcome or not. It really is about, as I like to think of it, as like working out, right? And I'm going to lead you through the 4 Brahma Vihara stations of the gym of the Brahma Viharas. So you had a workout this morning here too. And so just like as you're pumping muscles, you want to have just enough in the repetition of it that you build some muscles, but you don't want to lift too heavily so that you hurt yourself. So this is why the sincerity, the ability to feel it and be confident in them, right? The strength of, say, your biceps as you're pumping, or your triceps as you're pumping. Those would be like metta and mudita, karuna, right? So connecting to the strength is what's important. Not that you can lift X number or that you can all of a sudden have a bigger muscle, right? So this is why as we're doing them, anytime it gets difficult, like the opposite quality comes up, for instance, kindness. If hatred or ill will comes up, then you just back off. And you can back off in several ways. One, so the other thing we do with these is we go through specific categories. And classically, though we'll have some shifts, is self, good friend, neutral person, difficult person, all beings. So let's say we start with self, and you visualize yourself as you are today, with the same shirt, same age, same whatever. And then as I go through the phrases, and let's say, may you be happy. And right now it's hard to feel happy as you are. Then you can visualize yourself as a baby. You can visualize yourself as a dolphin. You could visualize yourself as a tree with broad branches. Right? So rational truth is not important here. The quality, being able to connect to the quality is key. That's what you're cultivating here, not whether it's right or wrong, good or bad. Same thing. Say when you get to difficult person, please choose a very slight difficult person, because you're not trying to fix them or fix your feelings about them. You're just going to connect to some quality that you can wish the difficult person happiness. So let's say it is a repetition silently for you, out loud, obviously for me. So let's say I say, may the difficult person be happy all the days of their lives. And you're like, oh, that's too much for me right now. So then all you have to do is just take off a pound or two at that station by changing the phrase for yourself when you repeat it silently. May the difficult person be happy today. Your sincerity is what you're developing. So make sure your phrase is sincere, not sarcastic, not what you want it to be in the sense of overcoming. Just really what can your heart in the moment. And if that's hard, then you can imagine just the sending it out towards that person. Does that make sense? Or you can visualize them as a dolphin that you're sending it to, or a tree that you're sending happiness to. And then the other really key thing here is that because it's like prayer, I really believe these qualities to be true and possible, and that they're felt sense. At any time there's any contraction in yourself, so I've been talking about emotional or mental contraction, but it also can be body contraction. So if your leg hurts or your back hurts, feel free to move. This is not a meditation to bear your way through. It is very much a practice of cultivating, receiving, sending. Receiving, sending. All right, so we're going to begin. Just going to go through a few phrases and then have some silence between the categories so that you can direct it more how you would like. And again, if I say a phrase, if there's some aspect that isn't working for you, just tweak it a little bit. But don't spend the whole time tweaking everything, just as much as possible. Just find a simplicity in it that can work in the moment. All right, so begin by visualizing yourself as we do metta, kindness or goodwill. Remember, I say the phrase, you repeat it to yourself silently. May I be filled with goodwill here and now. Let me know wellness in any moment I need it. Let peace and ease be my guide today. Let me know true happiness all the days of my life. On the next inhale, you're going to connect with how you know that it can be true and possible. And on the exhale, you're going to feel it, perhaps radiating from head to toe, perhaps through all the pores of your body. And if that's difficult, just any part of your body, maybe your pinky can receive. Let it happen however it comes up. Any part of you or all part of you that can receive and know some sense of possibility and confidence. Any of these phrases, any sense of goodwill. And as we go through these, if it's useful at any time to place your hand on your heart, or perhaps your hand to the ground as the Buddha did as a witness, or your stomach or chest area, anywhere that works for you. Perhaps for some of you, even the back of your head at times. And feel free to do so. Next, we're going to think of a benefactor or good friend, someone that's really easy to send these to, and you know they will receive it easily. Maybe a friend here. And by the way, these could be groups of people. So let's say everyone in this Zoom room is your friend right now, your Kalyana Mitra. So you could be sending to everyone here. May the good friend be filled with kindness here and now. Let our friends in this room connect with a sense of well-being, however we define it. Let every one of us in this room of good friends connect with peace and ease here and now. And let true happiness lead these good friends all the days of our lives. On the inhale, connect with how you know that it's true and possible. And on the exhale, you're going to send it to everyone in this room or your good friend that you chose, for them to do with as they wish. You're freely giving. Connect with yourself, feel your centeredness, feel your good heart. And now visualize a neutral person, a stranger, where there's not a lot of love or hate. Mild. May this neutral person know loving kindness whenever they need it. Let well-being be their guide today. Let peace and ease be accessible to them whenever they need it. And may this neutral person know true happiness all the days of his or their lives. On the inhale, connect with how you know that it's true and possible. And on the exhale, you're going to send it to this neutral stranger person or persons, freely given for them to do with as they wish. Next breath or two, connect with yourself, feel your centeredness, feel your good heart. Perhaps feel the openness and ease you're feeling. And if there's any contraction, find a different point that feels easeful. If you need to lie down so you feel easeful, or move your leg, or do some twists or whatever, give yourself the permission to do so. Let yourself have ease. Now visualize a difficult person or people. Please, someone mild. Not someone you're really angry at. Because remember, this is about your sincerity and connecting with kindness for yourself. Your muscle of kindness here. So you want to care for it. You want to strengthen it, but you don't want to hurt it. May the difficult person know kindness whenever they need it. May a sense of well-being be accessible to these difficult people here and now. Let a sense of peace and ease be their guide today and every day. May the difficult person know true happiness all the days of their lives. On the inhale, connect with how you know that is true and possible. And on the exhale, send it to a difficult person or people for them to do with as they wish. Connect with yourself. Now visualize all beings. And sometimes it's hard because it is all beings without exception. So there's one or two people that it's hard to include, then perhaps it's useful to, again, visualize everyone as trees, perhaps, or the earth, the galaxy, or as when you're sending this, that it's just energy that's radiating vast and wide. May all beings be filled with goodwill. Let a sense of oneness be known to me, to us, to everyone, whenever we need it. Let peace and ease be the guide for every being in this earth or throughout the galaxy. And let true happiness radiate far and wide. On the inhale, with how you know that is true and possible. And on the exhale, send it first throughout your body and then perhaps radiating through all the pores of your being, even perhaps as light or heat or a wind, a cool breeze. Perhaps putting out all the fires on earth, some cool water, rain. Given the time, I'm going to just take a category or two as we go through karuna, compassion, and the same with the others. Let's visualize yourself first in karuna. May I hold my pain with mercy and kindness. Let me forgive myself for past mistakes. Let me know safety and protection here and now. And may I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering all the days of my life. On the inhale, connect with how you know that is true and possible. And on the exhale, you're going to send it through your beings in any way and in any place that can receive new. There's some sense of confidence or possibility of its truth. And now with sympathetic or altruistic, inclusive joy, let's visualize. It always begins with a good friend, actually, this category. So imagine a good friend. That's the beginning point of mudita. May my good friend know that their happiness is strong and stable. May my good friend connect with a simple joy in any moment that they need it. And may good friend, good fortune and success, however they define it. On the inhale, you're going to connect with how you know that it's true and possible. And on the exhale, you're going to send it to your good friend, freely given, for them to do with as they wish. Now in equanimity, again, that always begins with others. Usually a neutral begins. Now imagine some strangers. Maybe these strangers have a sense of steadiness, a balance to the comings and goings of events. Maybe these neutral people be able to see things clearly as they are and not as they wish it to be. And may these neutral people have a sense of resilience that they can connect to whenever they need it. On the inhale, connect with how you know that is true and possible. And on the exhale, you're going to feel it in yourself and then extend it in all directions and all times. Just let it out. Just a few minutes left. So just let any of those phrases that come up for you either just come up and be known and expressed by yourself to whatever category, or pick a person or a category and then let those phrases or a specific set of phrases. Again, it's this confidence and the sincerity that's key here. And as we come to an end, I invite you to visualize all beings. May all beings find a sense of settledness in the midst of changing events. Let us be able to balance the joys and sorrows of our lives with ease and composure. And may we know a sense of resilience, ability to have a sense of expansiveness and possibility with any events that comes up in our lives. May every one of us, without exception, know contentment all the days of our lives. On the inhale, connect with how you know that it's true and possible. Any sense of it. And on the exhale, you're going to feel it permeating yourself and then radiating far and wide in all directions and all times. All right. Everyone.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Took a little longer than I thought it would.
So our Dharma speaker today is Reverend Keiryū Liên Shutt, a Dharma heir of Zenke Blanche Hartman in the tradition of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. Born into a Buddhist family in Vietnam, she began her meditation practice in the Insight tradition of Spirit Rock. She was a founding member of the Buddhists of Color in 1998. Her Soto Zen training began at Tassajara Monastery, where she lived from 2002 to 2005, after which she practiced monastically in Japan and Vietnam. Drawing from her monastic experiences, she endeavors to share ways in which the deep settledness of traditional practices can be brought into everyday life. Yen's strength as a teacher is in making Zen practice accessible to all, and their website is accesstozen.org. Welcome, Yen.
Thank you, Cass. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's good to see you all. Recognize many faces and names. I'd like us to do what I'm calling a chat bloom. I would say I picked this up at EBMC, POC group. So what I'd like you to do is, this is one way to bring all your voices in without going around the room, so to speak. So so you click on chat, and then you're going to write in, but here's the key. You don't push return or send until I say so. And then it just blooms, right, the chat. So write in 1, 2, 3 words about how you're feeling right now, right? But don't push return yet. And if you don't know what chat is, it's on the bottom. And then you click on it. Oh, and then you want to make sure it says everyone, because I just saw mine that I was talking to somebody first. I already changed it. So you want it to the blue thing to say everyone. Okay, ready? I'm going to count down now, backwards. 3, 2, 1. Hit return or send. There we go. And then, Cass, will you do the pleasure of reading some of those off for us?
From Shinzen, soft, open, caring. From Reverend Lien, glad, connected, settled. That word is settled I've noticed it came up several times. Peaceful, sad, hopeful, curious. Peaceful but tired. Relaxed, a little tired, thoughtful, pensive, heavy, defeated, angry, hopeful, anxious, fearful, challenged, peaceful, introspective, smooth, open, settled, intrigued, stimulated, optimistic, worried about fires and politics, uncertain, exhausted, tired, alone, old, doing well, disappointed that I didn't get a silent meditation. I'm feeling calm and quiet, sleepy, curious, frustrated over length of shelter in place. I am calm. So a wide range, I would have to say.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And actually, it goes well with what I want to say. And though, probably in any room of 48 people, we're going to get pretty much, my guess is similar answers in any situation. And I will say that when a week ago when I remember I was going to be here today, I thought, well, what should I talk about that people might need right now? And so I came up with Kashanti Paramita, which is usually translated as patience or forbearance. And so I want to share some thoughts with you on that, because I thought right now, as shelter in place is going on and on and on, for those who came on a little later, I was just sharing that yesterday, my meditation group, we met at our rental space for the last time. We gave up the rental space because this is just going on, right? 5 months we were paying rent and not being there. And this is probably going on for the rest of the year, probably not meeting in person, right? So yeah, there's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of conflicting emotions, and difficulties. And then now we have the fires also. So the Kashanti, and I say Kashanti Paramita, and I'm going to talk mostly from the sense of the Paramitas. So let me start out by sharing. This is from Del S. Wright, really good book on the 6 Paramitas. He's a scholar of Buddhists and a practitioner, mostly a scholar. And right here from the introduction, he says, the question my life presses upon me, whether I face it directly or not, is, how shall I live? As what kind of person? End quote. All of us face the task of constructing a life for ourselves, of shaping ourselves into certain kinds of people who will live lives of one kind or another, for better or worse. Some people undertake this task deliberately. They make choices in life in view of an image of the kind of person they would hope to become. From the early beginnings of their tradition, Buddhists have maintained that nothing is more important than developing the freedom implied in their activity of self-cultivation, of deliberately shaping the kind of life you will live. For Buddhists, this is the primary responsibility and opportunity that human beings have. It is, they claim, our singular freedom, a freedom available to no other beings in the universe. And although circumstances beyond anyone's control will make very different possibilities available for different people, Buddhists have always recognized that the difference between those who assume the task of self-sculpting with imagination, integrity, and courage, and those who do not is enormous, constituting in Buddhism the difference between enlightened ways of being in the world and unenlightened ways. So I'm going to just read a few other things that's important. So I'll say more how there's 6, but I'll just say the 6 perfection are basis for training. This means that they constitute a series of practices or trainings that guide Buddhist practitioners towards the goal of enlightenment or awakening. These 6 trainings are the means or methods to that all-important end. But the perfection are much more than techniques. They are also the most fundamental dimensions of the goal of enlightenment. Enlightenment is defined in terms of these 6 qualities of human character. Together, they constitute the essential qualities of an ideal human state. The perfections, therefore, are the ideal, not just the means to it. Being generous, morally aware, tolerant, energetic, meditative, and wise, those are the 6, is what it means for a Buddhist to be enlightened. If perfection in these 6 dimensions of human character is the goal, then enlightenment, understood in this Buddhist sense, would also be closely correlated to these particular practices. Recognizing this, one sutra says, enlightenment just is the path, and the path is enlightenment. To be moving along the path of self-cultivation by developing the 6 perfections is the very meaning of enlightenment. So the paramitas are to get to the other shore, right? Or it's a way of crossing a difficult expanse and finding relief on the other shore, so to speak. And I am speaking of the 6. They are considered, you might have heard that there are 10. So in the Theravada tradition, the older Buddhism, there are 10. And in the Mahayanas, there are 6. In some version, there are 10 in that, but in general, there are 6. And I'm going to talk about those. So each of the 6 perfections support the other 5. And again, they are generosity or dana, for those, morality or ethics or sila, patience, which we're going to talk about today, or kshanti, energy or virya, right? Meditation, samadhi, and then wisdom, right? Prajna. So while there are 6, they're considered in 2 groupings. So the first set is considered perfections, so perfection is perfecting, practicing to reach an ideal, right? Are considered for everyone to practice, which is generosity, ethics, and patience, right? And then the third are often considered more for monastics, or in these days we could say for a spiritual practice, which is energy or zeal, meditation, and wisdom. So what I really appreciate about the Dale Wright version is a really great way of framing them as character building. These are qualities that a good person or someone who wants to have a good life, right? And this good life is how do we meet life, not like what we have in life. So remember, Buddhism is not as focused on what you have as what is the way that you meet the condition of the world. So these are considered 6 qualities to cultivate as a way to meet the world, no matter the conditions of the world, right? So, and then classically is to be as a Buddha. In the Theravada tradition, in the Mahayanas, it's much more as a bodhisattva, which of course the thought of enlightenment and that we all will be enlightened together. So not only is it a self-cultivation, so when he said that, was much more from the Theravada view, whereas in the Mahayanas view, it is a self-cultivation and a cultivation so that all the selves in the world can also know that, so that we all can understand that together. So we all have access to being able to develop these qualities, right? Not just for myself, but for all of us. So Kshanti is the third one, and I'll just read you his intro on it. It is also very useful. Kshanti, translated here as tolerance and elsewhere frequently as patience or forbearance, has been a central virtue throughout the long history of Buddhism. It was one of the 10 perfections the Buddha praised in early Pali Sutras. All right. Kshanti means unaffected by, able to bear, able to withstand, and in that dimension indicates a strength of character, a composure, and a constancy of purpose that allows a bodhisattva to continue pursuing universal enlightenment in spite of enormous difficulty. Emphasizing that basic dimension, this third perfection could also be translated as the perfection of endurance, or the perfection of composure. Bodhisattvas who have trained in this virtue are imperturbable and well composed, calm and focused in the midst of adversity. Through deliberate self-cultivation, they build the capacity to withstand danger, suffering, and injustice, to resist the onslaught of negative emotions, and to think clearly under the stress of turmoil. They attain an admirable constancy that even in the face of enormous opposition equips them to move effectively when others have been overwhelmed. So these days I've been thinking a lot about how, in some ways, we could say that, in the Four Noble Truths, of course, there's suffering, there's the cause of suffering, there's the end of suffering, and then the path. And also perhaps the end of suffering, or one way that we talk about how we can alleviate or end suffering, is that I think a lot of our practice is how can we not be overwhelmed by our pain and our suffering, or the pain and suffering of the world, right? Audre Lorde has there's a great quote from her, from Sister Outsider. How much of this truth can I bear to see and still live unblinded? How much of this pain can I use? I'll say that again. How much of this truth can I bear to see and still live unblinded? How much of this pain can I use? So, right? In the first Noble Truth, we're asked to investigate, get closer and closer to pain and suffering, but not to be masochists or force other people to do it. But it's really, what can we use? How do we know this more so that we could more appropriately transform it, right? How much of this pain can I use? And the way to use it is not to be overwhelmed by it. And I know when I'm overwhelmed, I shame, I blame, I turn away, I push away, right? Or I'm deluded about it. I'm in denial. So, again, the perfections indicate a strength of, and Kshanti in particular, indicate strength of character, a composure, and a constancy of purpose that allows a bodhisattva to continue pursuing universal enlightenment in spite of an enormous difficulty. So there are three kinds, and most of this teaching I'm going to be sharing now is from Del Wright, and then from the more Zen tradition, Robert Aitken, The Practice of Perfection. So to know Kshanti actually begins with acceptance of the Four Noble Truths. I kind of just framed that. And then the three kinds are classically called endurance of hardship. Aiken makes a really, really great way of sharing this by the character, right? The Chinese character, ideogram of Kshanti is a sword over the heart. So in a way, it's the ability to endure personal hardship, the things that affects our heart, that hurts us, hurts our heart in particular. And so the capacity to tolerate all forms of personal suffering, forbearance of personal hardship, what I would call dukkha dukkha, if you know your dukkha's. Dukkha dukkha's are the sickness, old age, death, right, and conditions of the world, and our responses to them, right? Then next is gentle forbearance, and this is where the patience is usually the translation, or tolerance in human relationship. The capacity to tolerate injuries of the body and ego caused by other people. Patience with others, or tolerance for other people. This is from Aiken. It's like the spirit of forgiveness. Injury is forgiven, and the occasion is used as an opportunity to reveal the essential harmony of all beings. There are no exceptional circumstances that would justify other kinds of responses. Don't forget these are ideals also. So don't forget that also, forgiveness does not mean condoning. But there's a sense of it's not going to continue to affect me. And then the third is acceptance of truth, or this from Del Wright, which I like. Tolerating the truth about oneself and the world. Practice as difficulty. How is the difficultness of practice in particular, and how do we practice with difficulties? And the capacity to tolerate more comprehensive visions of reality that undermine long-standing habits of mental insecurity. I'll repeat that. The capacity to tolerate more comprehensive visions of reality that undermine long-standing habits of mental insecurity. I know I often suffer, especially in relating with others or the world, is how can it be this way because it's not how I think it should be. And a lot of that has to do, and especially with other people, partners in particular, why aren't you giving me what I need, right? Haven't I trained you well enough? But don't forget, these are self-trainings, or creating conditions for others to have access to the same training. So this is, again, from Aiken. This is a way of working out bodhicitta. Right? Bodhicitta in Buddhism is the thought of enlightenment, or the thought of enlightenment of all beings in the Mahayana school, right? It involves difficult, sometimes painful practice, a self-imposed limit upon the appetites, and a drastic avoidance of ordinary worldly distractions. Gradually you purify yourself, Wumen wrote, eliminating mistaken knowledge and attitudes you have held from the past. So much of our practice is to be able to build two things. One is a way to identify more clearly, and two, to build the capacity to be with difficulties. This is what happens in retreat. Right? I like this these days. I find myself saying, you should be. Who here has not been on a retreat? Well, who here has been on a long, by retreat, I mean a 3 days or more silent retreat. Like, you guys have one every year, right? Yeah. So you know that in those retreats, the best one, not that we're grading them, but the best ones are some fucking trigger has happened, right? Usually caused by other people, we think at first. And then, you cry or you rage or you whatever about it. And then you find a peace to it, right? You overcome a hardship, right? And then you have a different framing of it. Usually for me, I have a different framing of myself in relation to it. And of course, the hard thing is that all the fucking emotional shit that I've been pushing away in relation to it. For me, often sadness that's underneath that anger that often is my first go-to, right? Or the sadness underneath the shame of the sense of myself, how I acted then, or wish I had been different. Once I can recompose those emotions, then I can let them be. Right? So much of a life, at least my life, is I'm trying to push away emotions that are uncomfortable, or sensations that are uncomfortable in relation to something. And then once I'm able to process it, and unfortunately, in my experience, processing means I am in a container where it feels safe and holding, that I can react and I can let it into the air, so to speak. Let it flow, so that it feels settled. It's resolved because of the experience, not resolved because what I thought it should have been. How I think it should be, or how I think it should be done was a way, then all of us wouldn't be here. Because, most of us are here because we have tried to think our way through so many things and it hasn't worked out, has it? Right? So, and then Aiken says, step by step, you eliminate your ideas of permanent soul, clarifying the oneness of life and death as you come to understand the unity of inside and outside. This is not just a philosophical practice, and it's not just working on yourself in a psychological sense, though the intellect and the psyche have important roles. And he goes on to say, it's not merely control of impatience. Talking about Kashanti, right? but the virtue that appears in the absence of hatred, repugnance, and malice. Like the other paramitas, it is an attitude that arises from bodhicitta rather than from guidelines imposed from the outside. So Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master, so that's the other main thing I'll be, and this is the part where I feel like I'm having some thoughts that I find new to me that I'm exploring. I would say when I was thinking about, this talk, and especially as the fires were starting to happen, I thought, well, I don't want to just come and, say it's endurance, it's patience, it's, overcoming this, overcoming that, without offering some kind of practice. And so I thought, well, the Brahma Viharas, right, might be a good practice. And then lo and behold, when I read Thich Nhat Hanh in this section, he says, a one-liner, and the Buddha gave you tools for it, which is the 4 Brahma Viharas. So first I'll just say that he frames as inclusiveness. Let me find it. Thich Nhat Hanh says the third petal, he has the paramitas as a flower with petals. The third petal of the flower is inclusiveness, Kashanti paramita. Inclusiveness is the capacity to receive, embrace, and transform. Receive, embrace, and transform. Kashanti is often translated as patience or forbearance, but I believe inclusiveness better conveys the Buddha's teaching. When we practice inclusiveness, we don't have to suffer or forbear, even when we have to embrace suffering and injustice. The other person says or does something that makes us angry. He inflicts on us some kind of injustice, but if our heart is large enough, we don't suffer. The Buddha offered this wonderful image. If you take a handful of salt and pour it into a small bowl of water, then the water in the bowl is too salty to drink. But if you pour the same amount of salt into a large river, people will still be able to drink the river's water. He says, remember, this teaching was offered 2,600 years ago when it was still possible to drink from rivers. Because of this immensity, the river has the capacity to receive and transform. The river doesn't suffer at all because of a handful of salt. If your heart is small, one unjust word or act will make you suffer. But if your heart is large, if you have understanding and compassion, that word or deed will not have the power to make you suffer. You will be able to receive, embrace, and transform it in an instant. What counts here is your capacity. To transform your suffering, your heart has to be as big as the ocean. Someone else might suffer, but if a bodhisattva receives the same unkind words, she won't suffer at all. It depends on your way of receiving, embracing, and transforming. If you keep your pain for too long, it's because you have not yet learned the practice of inclusiveness. So the way I'm thinking is that in the 4 Brahma Viharas, we are actually taught to do exactly those 3 things: to receive, to embrace, and to transform. Right? And I'm going to talk about those in 2 ways. One is what I would say as right now I'm thinking as the up and down, and then as the across. Right? So I know that in terms of the 4, so again, they're metta or goodwill or kindness, karuna, which is compassion, the wish to alleviate suffering, mudita, inclusive joy, and the 4th is upekkha or equanimity. So I know many years ago, right, when I first started at Spirit Rock in that tradition, I was given metta by a teacher of color. I was sitting with the women of color group for the most part, Margarita Lourdes, and she said, you should do metta. You need metta. And we get metta. Anyone who's been to Spirit Rock, you get metta every day. Right? That's kind of the base in a lot of convert Buddhism, convert Theravada Buddhism. And to me, while it's true that it expands out, which is the this way that I'm going to talk about, it also is very much about me, right? Metta, most of us do the I, may I, may I, may I. I did it for years and years. Right? And so it has that sense of like, there. That's what I like to think of metta. Metta is like a, there, it's okay. It's okay. You know, just be kind to yourself. By just, I don't mean like it's little, just like let that be enough, kind of just. And then, actually, I'm going to pause and talk about this way because we already did it in meditation, right? So in the Brahma Viharas, each of them open up, right? In metta, you start with self, then you go to someone where it's really easy to receive, right? The used to be called the mentor or the benefactor. Now we say a good friend. So notice that that's first, it's self. May I receive metta, or one of the other ones, right? Karuna, mudita, upekkha, right? And then the mentor, the good friend, is, remember in my instruction, and this is I hear all the time, someone where it's really easy for you to give and for them to receive. So it's both receiving and embracing. You're making it someone easy to receive, and it's easy for you to embrace that you're bringing them into the circle of metta, right? We talk about expanding, but it's really being more inclusive. My metta is including bigger and bigger and bigger. That's all the Brahma Vihara. It's very intentional that they help you to expand and be more inclusive. And then the third is neutral. People you don't really know. It's a little harder to be inclusive to strangers, isn't it? That's why kin and all that is really, right? Then we expand to classically called the enemy. These days we say a difficult or challenging person. But isn't that harder? And then all beings, without exception, that's the key. Is that much more big of an inclusiveness? So already in that practice we're doing the lateral kind of receiving, embracing, and then transforming. To transform the small sense of kindness or whatever into a vast. That takes transformation. Just like ideals take transformation. Right? They take the steps before they can really be expansive. And yet, when you can do the expansive, of course, it comes back, right? The reverberation from back and forth. So then not to go back to the linear or lateral, I think. Of course, so again, metta, I know it's so much about me when I do metta. Not by that, I don't mean that's a bad thing, but that's where I really feel it. Like kindness, I really need to be kind to myself. And then karuna, by the way, often in classic, you start with another. You start with a good friend. Both in karuna and mudita, the classic instruction, don't start with yourself, right? And yet, most of us also want to practice compassion with ourselves. How can I be patient with myself? How can I forgive myself for past mistakes? How can I be kind to my suffering? How do I know safety? And then it also, so it is self and other, right? Because you also often have compassion. The two things I get a lot of question about around compassion is how do I be kind to myself? And then I'm having a hard time being kind to this other, right? How do I do that? And so it starts to open up. And then mudita, it's like happiness. Again, it's that embracing that's, because when it's not self, yes, you can embrace yourself without doubt, but embracing as something is being embraced, right? So again, it's that expansion of this way I'm calling it now, right? So, and I know that mudita, most of the questions I have is like, my coworker just got the job I wanted, or some version of that, and I feel envy or jealousy, but I want to be happy for them too, right? And so again, it's that relational, that other, but it's a smaller circle. So it's how do I embrace the happiness? How can I be inclusive in my joy, right? How can I be inclusive in my joy? So to me, this is why I, before this talk even start to talk about mudita as inclusive joy. I also think the hardest part about mudita is that how can I be joyful that includes this one? Like, yeah, I have some envy and I want to be joyful for them, but I want to feel the joy. So it also includes me. And then as we go to upekkha, right? Upekkha starts with the neutral person first, classically. So it already asks you to start in a place that's already more expansive and embracing. Not so much about receiving first. It's about embracing and transforming first. And even in the instruction, all beings without exception. That's always the hard one, right? All beings, including, like this morning, as we were getting ready, Deb and I, we have a neighbor that on the weekend has loud music for a couple hours, right? And, should I go down and knock on their door and try to ask them to be quiet? But how do I include the annoying, right? So upekkha, how do I find settledness in the midst of the loud noise of the music and the person's joy, you could say, and listening to music loudly? I myself have played music loudly. In my sense, all those days of sad love songs, right? All those breakups, and you just crank that. It's like Sarah McLachlan, just crank that Sarah McLachlan so I can cry and cry and cry, right? So how can I be more, it asks you already in upekkha to be embracing. And in the embracement, I will tell you that transforming, we think is something we can do. I'm not saying it's not possible, but to me, when you receive and when you embrace, transformation happens. Because mostly I'm trying to push away or turning away. So when I'm open to receiving, and then I go that other step in which I'm not just allowing what's happening, but I'm willing to accept it. That this is the condition right now. By acceptance, I don't mean that I have to say that it should be happening. Acceptance is, it is happening. Like fully acknowledging. Like I know, part of the difficulty of this coronavirus thing going on, the pandemic now being shelter in place going on and on, was like, how can it be this way? Why can't I have X, Y, and Z? Why can't we? But when I can say what this is what it is, then I have a sense of settledness and composure already. But it took a lot, right? And it helps by starting to receive it, like just letting a little bit in until you can allow. So again, that inclusiveness is about opening up, right? And also letting things in. Like in myself, I grow taller as I receive. I know when I'm meditating, when I am hunching, usually I'm having an emotion or a thought that's really difficult, right? Or the body is tired. So the four Brahma Viharas, I think, help us to, I've been listening to a lot of trauma talks on trauma during this time. Really, a really great free summit. I can put that in a minute, on trauma skills. And so I have some thoughts about, and I did a 6-month thing on how to reclaim our wholeness, which has to do with trauma. So, when trauma happens, and we're in right now, right? For all of us, we're having what's called like prolonged stress trauma. Right? Is that what was ordinary becomes more than ordinary. It's amplified and it feels overwhelming. So remember, when pain doesn't feel overwhelming, that helps us to then be able to deal with it or be with it, right? There's some drastic change in this being's sense of the world. So trauma, in some ways, is not the injury. It's what is done with the impact of the injury. Right? How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to decide what quality are we going to meet what's happening in the world? And of course, I didn't bring it up earlier, but also all the social injustices that we can see so blatantly right now, both economically and racially, and other ways, ability. So in this framing, to heal is to have some sense of appreciating, of receiving, of embracing what is here in our ordinary life that we can be with. This is why in mudita, I also put in, and this one I just made up when I did a day long on the four Brahma for just last Saturday, is I think appreciating a simple joy is what we also need these days. Not some huge joy, just a simple joy. We can connect to it in some sense. Even just, your first bite of cereal. This morning I had flakes, right, with blueberries. And the blueberry burst, the sweetness open, like that's a joy. You get that in retreat too, by the way, right? How many here have had a really great bowl of oatmeal on a retreat? You're like, wow, this oatmeal is like the best thing I ever had. And you're like, how come it's not like that when I'm not in retreat? Huh? Because we're quiet enough, we're centered enough that the simple joy of life floods us fully. And then also, where's the ordinary sense of connectedness and love and safety and peace and well-being that is here? Right? And this is why also the Brahma Viharas are about being able to connect to these. There's a possibility of them. Because when it's difficult, it's really hard to remember that one, they are here, and two, that I know what they are. At least that's for me. So, the middle way of trauma, right, is how do we find ourselves in the window of tolerance, right? When it's not too high and not too low. So the Buddha taught them, sometimes we have a mistaken idea that practices, I have to be with things the way they are, right? Like something's wrong with me when I'm resisting pain and suffering. The Buddha didn't say, fuck you, just face pain and suffering, whether you can or not, right? He teaches us ways of how to be with pain and suffering. And so much of retreat is about regulating that, isn't it? Yes, it is true that our practice, because our habitual way is to turn away from pain and suffering. So practice is asking us to stay just a little bit. But most of practice, the instructions are really simple, right? Every retreat you go to, same fucking instruction. What makes you a senior student is that you're willing again to try it again. And yes, you have some wisdom from other practices, but there'll become a point in which everything you've learned isn't fucking working. And this is why you have interview with teachers, because you get stuck. And then teachers will say, oh, did you remember to do this about that? And you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's why you leave a practice discussion room going, oh, yeah. They're not telling you anything new for the most part. They're just reminding you of the stuff because you're stuck. You're triggered, and therefore you get stuck in a habitual way of dealing that isn't working anymore. And so they try to remind you of different ways. And for most of us, that's because in the middle, we're keeping over effort, right? We keep going, I need to be with the suffering. Right? And then the teacher said, oh, maybe it's okay to go have a cup of tea. Have you thought about lying down or changing your position? You're like, no, I'm a Zen. And then you're like, oh, yeah, okay. I'll give myself permission to, not do half lotus, but do quarter lotus or something. And then you're like, oh, yeah, ease. I know, as having led retreats, that halfway through you start saying to people, where's the ease? Look for the ease right now. release the brake of concentration and start to, work on your two pedals there as you're driving, like mindfulness, ease off on concentration, strengthen mindfulness, strengthen the bigger embracing view. That's what I'm calling mindfulness these days, more embracing view. And mindfulness always in relationship too, by the way. So I think the four Brahma Viharas actually give us a sense of how to regulate, find our middle way again. Find that spot in which we can hold binaries, in which we can hold the complexity of our lives, the good and the bad, the joys and the sorrows. All right. 3 reference books. One is The Heart of Buddha's Wisdom, a great book by Thich Nhat Hanh for all the, really good book. For all the, one this, two this, 3 that, 4 that, whatever. Perfections by Dale S. Wright. Very good book. I will say Norman Fisher has a new one on the 6 perfections, but I didn't find it so useful for today. So, and then Robert Aiken, The Practice of Perfection. I've talked pretty much up to my time limit. And Cass, do we have time for a question or two?
Yeah, we have time for a question or two.
All right. Any thoughts, comments?
Lynn, I have a question. This is Thomas.
Thomas.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's so great to have you back. It really resonated with me what you shared about from Thich Nhat Hanh, about instead of looking at patience and composure and forbearance and endurance, which all sound like, oh my God, okay, I'll put up with it, but to look at it as inclusiveness versus patience. And so my question, at the very beginning, you mentioned that these are things to be perfected on the path to the other shore. Mm-hmm. And so inclusiveness sounds like non-duality, so when one reaches a state of non-duality or can abide there, like the Buddha did, do all of these 6 perfections really become unnecessary? Like if everything's all inclusive and you don't really need to, endure and all this, it just, none of us are enlightened, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think the key is that they all work with each other. That's 1. And 2 is that remember that things are always changing. So the ability to respond is the key. So in some ways, so a couple of things to think about Kshanti is that one, that the usefulness of endurance is that part in which, or the quote where I had where it was about the constancy. So remember, these things work together. So we're asked that where can we find the constancy of, say, concentration? Where can we find the constancy of wisdom? Where do we find the constancy of generosity, right? So one, what helps us to which goes to my definition, which I don't really know, but this is my definition, that the difference between a Buddha, I think the main difference between a Buddha and me or you is that they have constancy, right? They're able to hold those in an evenness with a constancy. I might have joy for one moment and then, then I fall into envy, right? Or I fall into despair. And so it's so much a practice. And that's why, in a way, the middle way is that way of not only from the 2, left and right or top and bottom, but it's, can you remember the middleness of things, the constants, and can you stay in the constancy of the window of tolerance or any way that you want to talk about it? Does that help?
A sense of abiding where it's not fleeting, but it sticks.
Yeah. And even abiding, implies that it is a activity. And as we all know, in any activity, there's ebbs and flow.
So this has probably come up many times, this question, but when we're seeking, the happiness of all beings, when we're, as we did in the meditation, it's like, it seems like you're kind of doing it on your terms. You're kind of asking for happiness on your terms, as opposed, like, for the selfish beings, for the, the greedy, for the cruel, for the people who are caught in what I would see as negative spaces, negative states. It's like I'm kind of want them to be happy, but in my terms of happiness.
What's the question?
Well, so the question is how can is that legitimate, or is that just self-serving? I mean, it seems like if you're not really sending them energy to empower their greediness and their whatever, then it seems like there's a mental shift that should be going on for me, like a qualification sort of what I'm asking for.
Sure. So the couple ways of talking about that. One is the Brahma Viharas are also what's called purifying practice. So, as in any, and that's actually true in anything you do for a while, is that it will bring up the opposite. But the Brahma Viharas, I didn't talk about it very much today, but they all have, do you guys know about the near enemy and the far enemy of the Brahma Viharas? No? So yeah, it's part of the teaching. So the metta, or kindness, or loving kindness, the far enemy is hatred and ill will. The one that we can really see as an obvious opposite, you could say, or the binary, right? And so then the near enemy is attachment to the outcome. The attachment to how I want it to be. I want you to be kind like this, right? And so in practicing it, it doesn't make you bad that you have that, because we all do, right? And so that's why part of the practice is really about strengthening your sincerity, or that's how I talk about it, strengthening your sincerity. Not only a possibility that's true, but that you're strengthening your sincerity to freely give it. So the Brahma Vihara are also ideal practices, and the purifying is kind of working through or being with, receiving, embracing, and then letting it transform all the tightness around it. And so that is why you're asked to ease off, right? When it gets to that part where, it's not sincere anymore, then it's not that you're not doing metta practice, you're just doing not a purified form of metta. And so if you want to start to have we want to be able to access the clarity. That's another way of talking about pure, right? The clarity of that, like the feeling that feels easeful about kindness. Like if I can, my good friend, it's really easeful to, or the benefactor, Blanche, it's so easy to feel, Blanche, my teacher, right? That she will have happiness. So when that's strengthened, then how do I take a little bit of that? Maybe it's useful to the person that you're having a hard time with. This is why I offered, right? That they can be a dolphin, so that any sense of them being to receive it is possible. Mm-hmm. So, and also this is why I always notice when I lead it, I always say, connect to your sincerity, right? On the inhale, connect to how you know that it's true and possible, and that you can then adjust it too. When I was doing the 2-month, at Spirit Rock, I had a friend afterward, we talked, and it was a concentration retreat, but he had been doing them for a while, so he was working with teacher on metta. And, and he thought, that he would be all like gooey and loving the whole time. But he said it was one of the hardest retreat ever, because it is a fucking purifying practice, right? It shows us all the places that it's hard to do that, right? So this is why, again, each of them, they start out hopefully with something. But again, I guess like you guys have heard it. The Dalai Lama, didn't understand self-hatred. in Westerners so much when we first started, because the self is considered, remember this Buddhist teaching is considered the easiest one. But for most of us, it's like, what? Right? And all these, metta in particular, the hardest one people talk about is self, and then all beings, not actually the enemy or the difficult one so much.
Thank you.
Sometimes we're the difficult one for ourselves, right? Yeah.
I'm wondering, have you written books that summarize how you perceive and explain all these things, or at least some of them?
I've been asked to write a book many times, and I've been trying to do them many times. I need help. If anyone here isn't, I've even tried to hire someone to help me, and I need help. I'm not so good when if it becomes specific that I can edit, then I can do it. And being asked to, like, it's like that thing, you're too close to your own stuff. So I would, yeah.
Well, I hope you can make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Let me just say that here's an opportunity for you to work on the constancy of your generosity. You can do that by contributing dana, which is the Pali word for generosity, to help the sangha meet its obligations and its commitments. So if you go to the donations page on the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, there's a link to make a donation through PayPal or credit card. Or you could send a check to GBF at 2261 Market Street, number 456A, San Francisco 94114. And just a reminder that if you want to be added to our email list, you can send a message to joecastrovinci@gmail.com. So recommended donation would be like $10 to $20 or whatever works for you, more or less according to your ability and your inclination. And we meet again on Wednesday nights, from 7:30 till 9. We have a sitting and an extended check-in period generally, but it changes from week to week what the content is. After the sitting, everybody's welcome to join us on that. Next week, our speaker will be David Lewis, a well-known member, well-known to the Sangha because he's a member, and a great teacher for us to be with. So just wanted to remind you, Leanne's website is accesstozen.org, accesstozen.org.
Does anyone know how Vajrapani is doing? Is it still standing?
I checked on Facebook yesterday. There was a message from 2 days ago that they had evacuated, but no further updates.
Thank you.
But I looked on the map there's a map of fires. I didn't recognize any of the area being exactly where Vajrapani was, but unreliable narrator at work.
Thank you anyway.
What about Insight Retreat Center? I didn't see anything on their website yesterday. Does anyone know? Gail's place? They're in Scotts Valley, so.
Scotts Valley?
They're not in Scotts Valley. They're in Santa Cruz, and they're okay. The fire's on the other side of 17.
Oh.
And this update is yesterday as of, I believe, 5 o'clock. Deep bows.
Thank you.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, no further announcements. Then I will ask Reverend Leanne to offer our dedication of merit.
All right, and the way I like to do dedication of merit is, and with your permission, of course, I don't mind the discordant of many voices. And the way we like to do it is at Access to Zen is I say a phrase and then you repeat it. So this way we're saying it to each other. So if people want to unmute themselves, it's a good time. All right. For any merit we accrued today.
For any merit
we approve today.
Including the connection.
including
The connection
To kindness.
to kindness,
Compassion.
compassion,
Inclusive joy.
joy,
Equanimity.
equanimity.
We wish for all beings.
We wish
For all beings.
In the 10 directions.
In the 10 directions.
And the 3 times.
and the 3 times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Directions are north, south, east, west, and in between, and then up and down. Those are the 10 in Buddhism. And then
Thank
the
you, everyone.
past, present, and future.
Ah.
To see you
Thank
all.
you.
Be
Thank you,
safe.
Cass.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Birthday, Cass.
Thank you.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy
Gosh.
Oh, happy birthday, Cass.
Thank you.
It's also Roy King's birthday. Did you know you share a birthday with him, Roy?
No. Oh, great.
All right.
Okay,
Bye-bye. Everyone be well.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.